A woman walked onto the Family Feud stage, said something, and Steve Harvey, for the first time in his 30-year career, completely lost his words. His microphone dropped to his side. His signature smile vanished. And in front of millions watching, the man who'd made a living out of never missing a beat, stood frozen. What she said in those next 10 seconds would stop a game show, silence an entire studio, and remind the world why some moments are bigger than television. The cameras were rolling. The audience was ready. The game board lit up with another question. But nobody in that studio was prepared for what was about to happen. Because what started as just another taping of America's favorite game show was about to become something no script could ever capture. Something real. Something raw. Something that would change Steve Harvey forever. This wasn't just television anymore. This was life, unfiltered, breaking through in the middle of prime time. And Steve Harvey was about to face the hardest moment of his career. It was a Tuesday afternoon in Atlanta. Studio 5 at the Family Feud production lot was buzzing with the usual pre-show energy. Contestants chatted nervously in the green room. Producers ran through cue cards. The audience filed in, ready for laughs and the thrill of watching families compete for cash and bragging rights. Steve Harvey walked onto that stage like he'd done thousands of times before. Gray three-piece suit perfectly tailored. Pocket square crisp. That unmistakable swagger that had made him one of the most beloved hosts in television history. He waved to the crowd, cracked a few warm-up jokes, made everyone feel at home. The Martinez family stood on one side of the stage. 5 members, all smiles, bouncing with excitement. On the other side, the Davidson family. 4 women and 1 teenage boy. They seemed quieter than most families. More reserved. But Steve didn't think much of it at first. Some families are just nervous on camera. The game started normally. Rapid-fire questions. Buzzer sounds. Steve doing what Steve does best, turning awkward answers into comedy gold, giving contestants a hard time, making the audience roar with laughter. The Martinez family was winning. The energy was high. Then came round 4. Steve read the question off the card. Name something you would thank your spouse for. Simple question. The kind that usually gets answers like, cooking dinner, or, taking out the trash. Crowd favorites. Easy points. The Davidson family's turn. The woman at the front podium was named Linda. Late 40s. Brown hair pulled back simply. Purple blouse. No flashy jewelry. She didn't look like someone trying to get on TV. She looked like someone carrying something heavy. And that's when everything changed. Because what Linda said next wasn't an answer. It was a confession. It was grief. It was love that refused to die even when death had already come. Steve hit the buzzer. All right, Linda, name something you would thank your spouse for. He had that playful tone, expecting something lighthearted, something he could riff on. Linda looked directly at Steve. Not at the camera. Not at the game board. At him. And her voice, when it came, was steady but fragile. Like glass holding itself together. For loving me even when I didn't love myself. For fighting cancer with me for 3 years. And for telling me, the night before he passed, that it was okay to laugh again. The studio went silent. Not the kind of silence that happens during a dramatic pause. The kind of silence that happens when a room full of strangers suddenly realizes they're witnessing something sacred. Steve's face changed in real time. The smile didn't fade, it shattered. His eyes went wide. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came. For a man who'd built an empire on quick comebacks and razor-sharp timing, he had absolutely nothing. The audience didn't make a sound. Producers in the control room froze with their fingers hovering over buttons. The other contestants on stage, even the Martinez family who were winning, stood motionless. Linda's hands were shaking now, gripping the podium. Tears started streaming down her face, but she kept her eyes on Steve. She wasn't crying for the cameras. She was crying because the grief was real, and it was here, in the middle of this brightly lit game show, whether she wanted it or not. Steve Harvey did something then that no producer had ever told him to do. Something that wasn't in the host handbook. He broke protocol. He stopped being the host. And he became a human being standing in front of another human being who was hurting. He didn't look at the cameras. Didn't look at the director. Didn't look at the game board. He walked directly across the stage to Linda's podium. Slowly. Not for dramatic effect, but because his legs were barely working. When he reached her, he put his hand gently on her shoulder. His voice, when he finally spoke, was nothing like the Steve Harvey voice America knows. It was soft. Almost a whisper, but the microphone caught it anyway. "Tell me his name." Linda's breath hitched. "David. His name was David." Steve nodded. "How long has it been?" 8 months. Her voice cracked on the word months. The cameras stayed on them. The producers, to their credit, didn't cut away. They understood that something bigger than a game show was happening. Steve's eyes were wet now. He wasn't hiding it. Wasn't trying to. "What did David do? What was his job?" "He was a firefighter," Linda said. 23 years. He saved people. That's what he did. He saved people." Her voice broke entirely on that last sentence. "But I couldn't save him." That's when Steve Harvey lost it. Completely. His face crumpled. Tears spilled openly down his cheeks. He pulled Linda into a hug, right there on stage, and she collapsed into him. Her family behind her started crying. The audience, hundreds of people, were on their feet, not cheering, just present. Bearing witness. Steve held her for what felt like forever but was probably only 15 seconds. When he pulled back, he kept his hands on her shoulders. His voice was thick with emotion. "Listen to me. David is watching this right now. I don't care what anybody believes, I know he's watching. And he's so proud of you. For still standing. For still fighting. For coming here today even though it hurts. You honored him with those words, Linda. You honored him. This is the moment no one in the studio, and no one watching at home, ever saw coming. Because what happened next wasn't planned. It wasn't scripted. It was just Steve Harvey being who Steve Harvey really is when the cameras catch him off guard. Steve took off his suit jacket. His gray, perfectly tailored, probably $1,000 jacket. He draped it over Linda's shoulders. "You wear this today," he said. "You wear it for David. And you wear it because you're a warrior. You understand me?" Linda nodded, unable to speak, clutching the jacket like it was a lifeline. Then Steve turned to the audience. "I need y'all to do something for me. I need you to stand up." The entire audience was already standing, but they stood straighter somehow. Linda's husband David was a firefighter. He spent his life running into danger so other people could live. And now Linda is here, still standing, still living, even though the love of her life is gone. If you've ever lost somebody, if you know what that weight feels like, I need you to applaud for Linda. Not for the show. For her. The applause that followed wasn't the usual game show applause. It was something else entirely. It was thunderous but somehow also gentle. It built and built until the whole studio was shaking with it. People were crying and clapping at the same time. The Martinez family, the opposing team, left their podiums and walked across the stage to hug Linda and her family. Competitors became comrades in grief. Steve stood back and let it happen. He wiped his face with his hand, not caring that his makeup was ruined. Didn't care that the show had gone off schedule. Didn't care about anything except the moment. When the applause finally died down, Steve picked up his microphone. His voice was still rough. "We're gonna pause the game right here. Linda, your family, you take all the time you need. We're not going anywhere." He walked back to center stage, looked directly into the main camera, and did something he rarely does. He got serious. "If you're watching this at home, and you're going through something, I want you to hear me. Life is gonna knock you down. It's gonna take people you love. It's gonna hurt so bad you don't think you can breathe. But you're still here. Just like Linda. And as long as you're here, you keep going. You keep honoring the people who loved you by living. You hear me? You keep living." Behind the scenes, producers were scrambling. Do they air this? How do they edit it? Do they even finish the game? The answer came from Steve himself during a break. He walked up to the production team and said 5 words. "We're airing all of it. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead." The episode aired 3 weeks later, exactly as it happened. No edits to make it prettier. No cutting away from Steve's tears. No shortening Linda's story. Every raw, unfiltered second. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, the clip was viral. Millions of views. Thousands of comments from people sharing their own grief, their own losses, their own versions of Linda's pain. But something else happened too. The network received hundreds of messages from people saying that watching Steve and Linda had given them permission to grieve openly. To stop pretending they were okay. To honor the people they'd lost without shame. One message came from a widow in Ohio who wrote, "I've been wearing my husband's jacket every day since he died. People told me it was time to move on. When I saw Steve give Linda his jacket, I realized I don't have to move on. I just have to keep moving. Thank you." Another came from a father in Texas who'd lost his son. "I haven't cried in front of my family since the funeral. I thought I had to be strong. Watching Steve cry on TV showed me that being strong means being real." Linda herself gave an interview weeks later. She said the moment on stage wasn't about the show, or Steve Harvey's fame, or anything televised. It was about a man who saw her pain and didn't look away. Who didn't try to fix it or minimize it. Who just stood with her in it. "Steve gave me his jacket," she said, "but he gave me something more important. He gave me permission to say my husband's name out loud. To talk about him without apologizing. That's a gift I'll carry forever." "And that jacket?" Linda kept it. Steve told her to. It hangs in her home, in a place of honor, next to a photo of David in his firefighter uniform. She says when the grief gets too heavy, she puts it on. And somehow it helps. What happened that day changed Steve Harvey too. In interviews afterward, he talked about it differently than he talks about most shows. He said it reminded him why he does what he does. That television isn't just entertainment. It's connection. And sometimes, in the rarest, most unexpected moments, it's healing. "I've hosted a lot of shows," Steve said in one interview. "I've given away cars, money, trips. But the moment I gave Linda my jacket? That's the moment I'll remember on my deathbed. Not because of what I gave her. Because of what she gave me. She reminded me that behind every person standing in front of those buzzers is a whole life. A whole story. And if I'm not honoring that, then I'm just reading cue cards." Steve started doing something different after that episode. Before every taping, he now walks out and looks at the families. Really looks at them. Not as contestants. As people. And if he sees someone carrying something heavy, he makes sure they know, whatever happens today, they're seen. The producers noticed it too. Steve started stopping games more often when something real broke through. Not for drama. Not for ratings. Because he understood now that some moments are bigger than the format. That the best television isn't scripted, it's surrendered to. Years later, that episode is still used in hosting workshops and media training as an example of authentic television. But more than that, it's used in grief counseling groups. In therapy sessions. In support groups for widows and widowers. Because what Steve and Linda did that day was give permission for grief to be public. For pain to be witnessed. For love to be spoken out loud even, and especially, when the person you love can't hear it anymore. David's firehouse in Colorado honored him with a memorial plaque that year. Linda attended the ceremony. She wore Steve's jacket. The firefighters asked her about it, and when she told them the story, grown men who run into burning buildings wept openly. One of David's closest friends at the station said something Linda thinks about often. David always said the bravest thing you can do isn't running into a fire. It's standing in your truth when the world wants you to hide it. Steve Harvey didn't just host a game show that day. He held space for grief on national television. He showed millions of people that it's okay to break. That it's okay to cry. That love doesn't end when life does. And somewhere, in the middle of all that pain and all those tears, something beautiful happened. A stranger became family. A game show became church. And a jacket became a symbol that grief, when honored, is just love with nowhere to go. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Because the world needs more moments like this. More people like Steve. More courage like Linda's. And more reminders that in our darkest hours, we don't have to stand alone.